Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining Rethink Retail and Placer.ai's webinar, Tomorrow's Storefronts, Retail Trends Shaping the Next Era of Stores. My name is Melissa Minkow, and I'm the Director of Retail Strategy at a digital consultancy called CI&T. We specialize in composable commerce solutions, data analytics, and CX optimization. And joining me today, I have Courtney, Ethan, and Gary, and I'm going to let them fully introduce themselves. Courtney, if you want to go first.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. Courtney Radke. I'm the Vice President of Innovation at SageNet. Prior to that, I was in the industry leading a lot of retail practices for some very large cybersecurity providers. And prior to that, I was in the restaurant industry as a technology operator.
Great. Ethan, we'll go next.
Hi, I lead marketing for a company called Placer. Placer's a location analytics company. What that means is people vote with their feet. We show you how they vote across the United States every single day.
Right. And Gary?
Hi, everybody. I'm Gary Urea, a long-term supply chain and logistics nerd, strategic advisor and delivery executive focused on a rapid business transformation and operational turnarounds across the end-to-end consumer-driven supply chains covering manufacturing, third-party logistics, wholesaling, retailing, and last mile. I've been in practice for myself for about 30-odd years.
Awesome. Thanks all for being here. I know we've had some technical difficulties. If we have a couple minutes at the end for Q&A, listeners, if you can go ahead and just drop your questions in the chat box or the Q&A box, that would be super helpful. Got chatbots on the brain because we are talking all things retail today. If I personally were to highlight the hottest topics in retail today, I would call out generative AI, retail media networks, and a renewed understanding of omnichannel that places strategic focus back on brick and mortar as much as it does digital. For a while, the focus has really all been all eyes on digital, but I think we're hearing a lot now from retailers that they're refocusing their efforts on brick and mortar and figuring out what role that's playing in their omnichannel strategy. So since this session is about the next era of stores, I figured we would start today's discussion with some kind of state of the state and then projections when it comes to brick and mortar. So my first question is, what have the latest technological advancements meant for brick and mortar retailers and shoppers? And this is for all three of you. So whomever wants to go first, go for it.
Go ahead, Ethan.
Yeah, so I'll kind of kick us off. I think when we think about the buzziest topics, they've actually, a lot of them have kind of failed to materialize. We think, blockchain, the metaverse, even, just walk out technologies. We're seeing that kind of the buzz and the excitement there start to dissipate. But I think there have been some really exciting innovations that are slightly less glorified, but really significant and impactful. So we think, the wider data analysis, right? And that could be everything from loyalty programs and cybersecurity. And it could be, obviously from us, it's location data or online data. That's obviously a huge piece of the puzzle. Things like loyalty, buy online, pick up in store. But it taps into what we were saying before. And, I'll piggyback on what you were saying, Melissa. This idea of omni. We've been talking about omnichannel for a long time. But the reality is what we essentially meant was people had stores and then they also had digital. And so that we called that omnichannel. That's not what the intention of omnichannel is. The intention of omnichannel is to have a unified perspective that leverages digital and physical channels for the unique benefits and attributes that those channels bring to the table in a cohesive, holistic manner. And I think we are just scratching the surface on what that means. Buy online, pick up in store is a fantastic example. But we're really only in the very early stages of seeing true omnichannel.
Yeah, so what you said there, Ethan, was very appropriate because it's not even really omnichannel anymore. Omnichannel is that outward-facing image of what you want to see as a brand. It's all of these different channels, but how do I actually capture, how do I gain value from that? It's really moving towards unified commerce. And that's all of these different channels supporting each other in a holistic ecosystem. So it is, yes, that data. But my data over here, my POS, how does that interact with my loyalty? How does that interact with my, staffing? How does it, all of it has to tie together. So we're seeing more of it moving to platform approaches and a unified commerce. It seems like, omni-channel was just getting its legs, but I think it's already been surpassed, right? We're going to unified commerce where we see these platforms out there. So I think it's absolutely telling that you say that, and more and more organizations are moving towards investing in brick and mortar. 70 to 80% of sales still come from an in-store fulfillment model, whether that's going into the store, whether that's buy online, pick up in store, whether that's last mile fulfillment. The physical store is now just becoming more of a digital asset. That's what we talk about, that marriage of physical and digital. How do I make the experience that I have from my phone at home when I shop online? How do I bring that into the store? They've got this real estate. They want to make sure that they're gaining the most value of it. So I think we'll continue to see a reinvestment into the brick and mortar. But on the technology that goes into it, they're going to be more thoughtful and planful about it, not just throwing it at the wall and seeing what sticks, really moving toward a unified commerce approach versus this anything out there omnichannel approach.
I'd just like to plus on it what everybody said and just say that for me, the fundamental question is how are we showing up for customers? And importantly, how should we show up for customers in order to create competitive advantage and long-term loyalty, which obviously is a route to long-term profitability. And I think that as our demographics are changing, our expectations of those demographics are more towards creating exciting propositions, as well as deploying process and technologies for seamless personalization. So I think we can talk about multi-channel, because I think that's what we were describing early on. We can sort of see a morphing of this into proper omni-channel, as opposed to trying to find a way of ping-ponging the data across the channels. But I think we still have to ask that fundamental question: how are we going to show up, and what's going to entice them to shop with us rather than shopping with somebody else, whichever way they choose to shop.
Right.
Exactly. Ethan, it looked like you were going to say something there.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, I think the point is super important, but it does. One of the I'm triggered, Gary, by when you said personalized, because I honestly don't think that's no, in the best possible way. I don't think that's always the case. I think one of the really interesting things, I think we want to see the harmonized retail. It's unified commerce, whatever language you want to use for it. The point is, it should be oriented towards what the retailer is aiming to provide to their customer base and their unique brand promise. My favorite example, I mean, compare Untuckit to, TJ Maxx, or, what they are trying to provide are two vastly different experiences. And therefore, the way they're going to do, or, take Burlington. Burlington famously cut off their e-commerce a month before the pandemic and was absolutely roasted by the kind of the thought police of retail. And yet they have been one of the most successful retailers of recent years. And I think what their digital looks like should be vastly different than what Untuckit's look like. And Untuckit's physical retail experience should be vastly different than what Burlington's looks like. So I think what we need to start embracing is the idea that it is not a one-size-fits-all approach. It is for each retailer to figure out what is their ideal mix of brick and mortar and digital channels to then provide the ideal experience for that wider customer base.
Yeah. Agreed. Digital differentiation is what we call it, right? It's you don't have to do it the same. You're actually trying to do it differently than everybody else.
Yeah, I love that. And brick and mortar differentiation too. And Primark made a point of really not having a robust digital strategy because their shopper was primarily in physical stores. And then COVID happened and people were wondering, were they going to pivot? And they held strong, and it still has worked for them. So it's interesting. But Ethan, you mentioned Just Walk Out technology, which I still am kind of waiting for a little bit because I do love it. And I think consumers could really embrace it. And you all have kind of tiptoed around this idea of what will the next era of brick and mortar look like? Do we think there's a role for Just Walk Out technology there? What other technologies, even though we've established that brick and mortar is not one size fits all, what can we expect of the future of brick and mortar?
I mean, I think Just Walk Out is a great example. I think Just Walk Out is amazing in certain types of experiences. Hey, I'm in an airport and I have this, I'm in a bodega in the city. I want to get in and out as fast as possible. If that's what you're attempting to provide, amazing. But I think we need to ask, what do customers actually want? I think one of the great myths in retail is the importance of convenience. Now, that's not to say convenience isn't important, but experience is. It is far more valuable. There is a reason that we want to go shopping in the grocery store, and why even after the pandemic, the amount of digital kind of acquiring of products for grocery has stayed such a small piece of the puzzle, because there are certain experiences that are far better in the store. And by the way, it's the same for others being better online than they would be in stores. And so what I think we need to ask about any technology is, what's the pain point it is there to solve? Because if the only pain point is people hate waiting in line to cash out, I don't think we understand the customer base well enough.
Agree. Gary, Courtney, any thoughts on what the future of brick and mortar could look like, or what role it would play in omnichannel specifically?
Yeah, it's the rationalization of everything that's been out there. They've had to try so many things for the last couple of years. We have an embarrassment of riches in the industry. The retailers have so many options, so many different ways to go. And a lot of times it's different buying units inside of an organization. Marketing will make this play, technology will make this play, and then they get down to it and they try to operationalize it. It doesn't work together. You're going to see a lot more of that. I've got 30 providers inside of my environment. I'm not going to get it down to one, but can I get it down to 10, right? Can I get the 10 that work really, really well for me? And it may not be, we're going to choose this for best of breed. It's really, really good at this one thing. They're probably going to choose that, hey, they're pretty good at these 5 things. And can we work with them to make them really good at the things that I actually want? So operationalizing all of this technology that we've thrown into retail organizations is really going to be key over the next couple of years. I don't think you're going to see this rush to buy all the new technology, see what works. Yes, there's a little bit of fail forward, but what they're really going to do is say, take stock of what I have, what's really important to my business, and how do I get that 30 down to maybe 10 manageable, and still going back to that ecosystem conversation. They're trying to create their platforms themselves. They want their customers to subscribe to their platforms, their loyalty. They want to take that same platform approach internally and say, where are the partners out there? Where's the technologies out there that really fits well in my sandbox? Not the 30, the 10.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't think I can add too much to that, except I'll just revisit your point, Melissa, on just walkout technology and the fact that Amazon tried it with their own employees. And I was having a conversation about this with a security LP kind of guy. And he said, oh, of course, they pulled it out. And said, yeah, I understood that. Why did they do that? They tried it with their employees and obviously had customer experience beyond that. And they still ended up sort of coming to that conclusion and they said, they didn't think like criminals. You have to think like criminals when you're trying out these approaches. Then you'll work out where the gaps are. But if you think that you're very trustworthy, you wouldn't possibly literally do that and walk out. You end up with a different kind of outcome, and you plan for that outcome. And the outcome is, what's the worst possible thing that could happen? A whole bunch of people come in and grab stuff and literally walk out without it being registered on the system. So whenever we think about technology, think about the opposite of it in terms of like the expectation of the customer, the worst customer you can imagine, come in and wreck your approach, and then plan for that, and you should be on to a winner.
I mean, I want to take on that, because the idea of the worst possible customer is interesting. If we flip it on its head and we say, what's the best possible store, right? When we think about brick and mortar, I think one of the things that what we're talking about is, how do we leverage physical locations for all of the values they bring? So we've mentioned the fact that there's a fulfillment component, whether it be BOPUS or delivery. You mentioned earlier retail media and what's going on in the physical spaces. We think about the fact that we're in discovery mode when we go to these stores, when we're walking the aisles. We're ready to encounter something that maybe if we were online, we'd be more focused on more mission driven. I think what we're essentially attempting to do is maximize stores for all of the unique values that stores bring to the table, while at the same time doing the same for digital channels. But I think one of the biggest lessons is, we don't need to make the store digital. We need to maximize the benefits that the store brings. So the name is slipping my mind, but I am stealing this from another gentleman. QR codes for within a grocery store. Unless you want me to do something later, don't pull me out of the physical environment. Give me the things that make me more likely to benefit and enjoy the physical environment. And I think that's the type of thinking that we really need to embrace in order to maximize that unified commerce, harmonized retail, omnichannel approach.
Yeah, I agree. But in a different scenario, think of like wayfinding with a QR code. How easy is it to go into a store, one of our, like a leading hardware store, right? Scan a QR code and say, where is this? And then blink something inside of the store. That's a good use of digitization. Mm-hmm. Me going and looking at, hey, where's the bananas in a grocery store? I don't need a QR code for that, right? So yeah, somebody saw it. Marketing maybe thought it was a good idea. It turns out, okay, we can do it, but should we have done that? It wasn't a good use of it, right? And so that's, again, going back to we threw stuff at the wall, see what stuck. It's stuck, but it doesn't really gain us any value from doing that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think I do agree there's definitely value to QR codes in stores, but maybe for payments, like to get someone in and out of the store really quickly, scan that, pay. But to your point, Ethan, of use the store as a physical space, figure out how you can amplify that and leverage the fact that a person is interacting with you in real time there. Yeah. Stores. Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, but going back to Gary's point, think about the worst use of QR code. If it's a static QR code, if it's a piece of paper, that can be so easily spoofed, send somebody to somewhere that you didn't intend for them to go. So now it's created an entire new industry of let's create smart QR codes, one-time use QR codes, those types of things. Like we're doing some of that, and there's other organizations. You have to now think about, okay, this was a great idea, but what if somebody wants to do something nefarious? Now we've got to go in a whole different direction. So yeah, you just got to look on the other side, the worst customer or the worst outcome of that.
Yeah, worst deployment of technology.
Yep.
That's perfect. Yeah, Gary, you gave us a great framework to kind of work backwards with some of this. So store associates are another great asset to a brick and mortar environment. I'm curious your thoughts on how the associate can ensure that customer journey is well supported, and also how can retailers make sure that they're supporting the associates really well in 2024?
I mean, if we think experience matters, right? We think experience is the ideal thing we want to happen in a store, apart from transactions. The store associate is the gatekeeper to experience. So we need to empower them. I'll give you the example to me that was so kind of glaring was I walked into a major retailer ahead of on Cyber Monday. I looked for a product. The store associate helped me find the product I wanted. They didn't have it in stock. That store associate had no means of saying to me, hey, do you want me to just order this and have it sent to your house? So I walked out of the store, looked up online, and bought it at another retailer because it was $5 cheaper. And so you did all of the work. The store associate was fantastic, but you never gave it that individual the mechanism to then complete the job. So I think there is a huge empowerment element about knowing what's in stock, knowing where else it's in stock, being able to provide that experience and starting to recognize that, by the way, it's not just what happens in the store. It was the CEO of Allbirds said 150% larger basket when someone visits a store and then shops online. You don't think that the store associate has a big part of that experience and bringing that value? I think we need to put a much bigger emphasis on empowering that individual.
Technology is supposed to make your employees brand ambassadors. Sometimes, we see that technology is having to replace employees or augment, especially in the restaurant industry as wages continue to go up, right? You're going to have to replace or augment people. But in retail, technology, unfortunately, when it's put in, it detracts from the employee experience because it's not done well. They're not trained on it. Or in your case, Ethan, they don't have access to the right technology. And even if they did, would they be trained on how to use it? So technology is supposed to enable your employees. It's supposed to make them brand ambassadors. It's supposed to make them better or more capable of supporting the customer. Unfortunately, when it's done wrong or, again, thrown in there and they're not trained on it, it has the 100% opposite experience. And then it drives them to somebody else. So, to protect the precious resource that is employees, your technology to support the employees needs to be on par. It needs to be ahead of the competition because, training, operationalizing, onboarding, it shouldn't be a 2-week ordeal. It shouldn't be sitting through several hour-long seminars. Train in the way that employees nowadays know how to be trained on mobile or something else. Make it quicker, get them on the floor quicker, and then have that technology enable them to support the customers, not detract from the experience.
Yeah, I would just sort of add on to those points about technology with the fundamental practice of making sure the employees are just trained to be good sales store associates, as opposed to, oh, you're coming here part-time, right? Just go there and Bill will sort you out, whatever it might be. That I think that while we focus on technology, we often miss the point of these are people. We want them to be brand ambassadors. What does it actually mean? What commitment are we making? What investment are we going to make in making them brand ambassadors? And then what does the technology need to do to allow the brand ambassador to continue their job with the technology? I think so many organizations, not only just retailers, but across the end-to-end supply chain, just think we just get the technology, they'll learn it somehow and get on with it kind of thing. And we need to sort of step back and think, what's the people component of all this? How do we make sure those people are suitably socialized into our environment so they understand where we're trying to get to, and then to make let's call it the IT department and all the partners we work with meet that requirement as opposed to the other way around. But we've got this great technology platform and we're going to force it into the people come what may. We'll take casualties along the way.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. You have two customers as a retailer. You have your employees as well as your end consumer. I think thinking about your employees like a customer is super important. So great. So let's shift gears a little bit. We've talked a lot about kind of front of house. Let's go behind the scenes. This is a time when, we all know margins are continuing to thin. Inventory management and price optimization as a result are especially hot topics. So curious what technologies you would talk about now that are in existence to really maximize efficiencies, especially when it comes to inventory management and pricing.
Yeah. It's one of those, it was brought up earlier, these technologies that, man, that seems like a good idea, but it maybe it was too soon, or it just didn't work at the time. I think we'll see things like QR, but also like kiosks that incorporate like learning models, language learning models that can, it can translate in real time. It can show people exactly where products are. It can have real time inventory. So Ethan, you don't have that experience. You go in, you look at the kiosk. Is it here? It's not. And then it automatically directs you to where it needs to go, or it can ship to your house, right? So using things like kiosks that previously they were there, they looked good, and then they got shoved in a corner because they didn't really have any real purpose. We wanted to talk to a person, or it wasn't intuitive or interactive enough. But now when we have, language models, we have real-time translation, we have unified commerce where that kiosk now knows everything that's in that store and every store in its vicinity and online. Now that can be used as an actual tool, not just repurpose what's there, but now we're seeing deployments of those. So that, and then staff augmentation, just technology that can, if an employee had a minutia type role, this is something that, hey, can robots do this? And now we're actually starting to see that with stocking, inventory, behind the scenes operations, why do we have to have a person back there doing that? That person should be, again, a brand ambassador in front of the store interacting with customers. So, that's just two examples. I'm sure Ethan and Gary have a ton more, but that's what we see a lot of, is those types of things, staff augmentation. And then what can we do with this kiosk that seemed like a good idea 5 years ago? Now let's actually use it.
Yeah, our experience has actually been from the data perspective. It's come from the product companies and the CPG brands. So they're asking, how do we put the right products in the right store? So, and it can be more sophisticated. So right now, if we think, hey, I have a vegan product, we could be kind of a little bit regional about it and be like, all right, major cities are over-indexed for vegans. But I can also do that at the location level. I can say these 50 targets within the state of Florida are the most over-indexed for vegans. Let me make sure I have my vegan products in that store. I think the big thing about pricing is customers are willing to pay for products that they want. It's the job of the retailer and the product companies to make sure the right products are in the right locations for those audiences. That's the magic we're attempting to identify. I think very often we're focused on cutting costs because we're not really sure if we have the thing that people want. But if we can make sure we have the right products and we can bring them to the right places, we'll see a lot more movement of those products.
For sure.
That's where, to an extent, demand planning systems and demand sensing technologies can help to an extent, but often they don't have access to all the data that's created, all the variables which allow those kind of fine tuning decisions to be made. And so that people implement demand sensing, demand planning systems, technologies, and they go, why didn't that happen? Well, because you haven't got enough data. You certainly haven't got enough data in the company, and you haven't exposed it to other factors outside the domain of the organization, which could be weather, a whole range of things. But and then we talk about inventory management. Again, there's applications, warehouse management systems, inventory management systems, whatever, that are built around the fact that we're pretty crap at doing sensible forecasts. So we have to say to ourselves, well, if we can't forecast enough, we better make sure we've got enough inventory just in case. And so I think that when we step back from this, and of course I talk it from a sort of supply chain point of view of trying to get the right thing in the right place at the right time, that's all the domain of the supply chain world, is how do we improve the quality of our forecasts? We've got AI that can help us with machine learning. How do we expose it to all the data we need, or valuable data points that should be brought into the data model as such? And how do we judge that we've arrived? Because we assume that we know when we've arrived, we've got 100% self-satisfaction, but actually is 99 good enough for now? I don't know, but
it's acceptable pollution, right? Some pollution is acceptable. You're not going to get to that magic number, but you're absolutely right, Gary. It's DIDO. It's data in, data out. I have a lot of data. Is it the right data? And I'm able to operationalize it, right? Just because you have it doesn't mean I can do something with it. So we have to get better at having all of this data. I'm sure you have thoughts on this, Ethan. Having all of this data, do I really need it? Because honestly, we get into the GDPR situation, we get into, I have all of this data, now I'm liable for this data. If you can't operationalize it very, very quickly and then either get rid of it or sanitize it, then you don't need to keep it, right? You need to make sure you can operationalize it very quickly.
I mean, I think you're dead on. It's do we have the right data? I think, look, we talk about Gen AI. One of the really interesting things about Gen AI is that if you use just standard ChatGPT-esque tools, a great deal of the information you'll come up with is absolute nonsense, right? So much of AI and machine learning asks, do you understand the data you're sitting on? And do you know how to utilize it? Because any data company will tell you it's not the amount of data, it's the quality of data. And I think there is AI is a very exciting means to an end, but you need to make sure you have the right things going in. And you need to make sure you understand the questions that you're really looking to ask so that the data, your output, actually drive real decision making.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, it's similar, right? You need the right quantities of product, just like you need the right quantities of data. Like your data should be in reflection of and proportion to your inventory in some ways, having inventory management both of product and the data. And Gary, you mentioned supply chain. Obviously, supply chain is kind of the backbone of a lot of what we've been talking about. So I'm curious, how is improving supply chain management the gateway to just improving efficiencies across the board? And I also do want to touch on sustainability as well in that context.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to get into trouble with this, because my version of sustainability is having an organization that survives the long term, which means that somehow it's got to make the right decisions for the long term, which affects its environment, it's where it sources stuff from. But in the short term, I'd say the sustainability is let's say the identification of waste and its elimination. It's not necessarily just changing all the light bulbs from old style to LEDs and suddenly we're all great and green as such. But I think to achieve that level of, I would say, sustainability across the supply chain, most people just will leap to integration, supply chain integration. That's the answer. Well, to an extent it is, especially if there's 4 levels of integration, and we're all trying to aim towards the 4th level, which is fully end-to-end supply chain integration. But the biggest stumbling blocks is interoperability of systems. So if I'm in a retailer, I want to be able to look in my system through all the different interfaces with my partners and suppliers, etc., right through to where that stuff is extracted from the earth or farmed in wherever it is. And to do that, I have to start focusing on things like collaboration, building trust, and visibility. And these are big issues that stand in the way of achieving a sustainable long-term business and a sustainable ecosystem that we work within. So when we talk about sustainability, it's so easy to get trapped into scope 3, whatever it's called, and not actually focus on how do we want to get beyond scope 3. We want to actually engage with partners in our supply chain end to end to deliver the proposition we want without waste and quickly, of course, because we've got very fast fashion cycles, and I'm not just talking about apparel, but we need to find ways to collaborate, to get visibility, to build trust in our networks, to allow us all to contribute to great success.
Yeah, that was a different take on sustainability than I was expecting. So that's fun. Ethan, Courtney, any thoughts on that, or how you would go a different direction with sustainability and the topic of supply chain?
I mean, you can slice this a million different ways. I mean, you look at sustainability, there's multiple ways to look at it. I look at something that's probably often overlooked, the power that it takes to run technology inside of a store. Are we going to get better at using less power? Think about one store. If you have technology in my space, network equipment or IoT devices, all of these things, one store is using a little bit of power. Expand that across 20,000 stores. And now if you look at, if I just make some simple changes, I'm not saying you got to get LEED certified in all of your locations, right? But if you just make small changes, the amount of money that you can save just by replacing some technology with more efficient technology, what was 5 boxes before, now I go down to 1 box. You don't really think about that in the cost of actually buying the technology. But if you amortize that over 5 years, it's a huge thing. It's huge for the organization that now you're able to invest more money into technology, into your customers, into your people. So just making small changes. I think these things get overlooked. We often see technology and the technology departments as a cost center. We need to use that different, frame of mind to see it as a revenue generator. Yes, it costs me money to put in technology. Nobody wants to go rip and replace all of these things. It's not fun. You do it because you have to or the market demands it. But now start thinking outside of the box of, yes, I put this in. It's solving this challenge. It's fitting into that platform ecosystem. Start thinking about the soft cost, the savings that you're going to get that normally you don't attribute to that. Putting in a new firewall, for instance, in 20,000 locations versus those 5 boxes before, you're saving a ton of money per day, per month, per year that you never really thought about before. That's, again, another frame from a sustainability standpoint that's completely different to Gary's. And I'm sure, Ethan, you have a totally different one because there's so many ways to slice it.
Absolutely. Yeah, Ethan, you had a little giggle there. I'm curious, is there a different direction you would go with sustainability, or has everything you were thinking been covered?
I think it's efficiency. I mean, for us, it's again, when you say things like, hey, if I had the right products in the right places and I knew where I wanted them to go, you're going to have much less waste. You're going to have a more aligned kind of supply chain motion and movement. So I think that chase for efficiency has huge ramifications if it can be done effectively.
Yep.
If I can just add to my 2 pennies worth of that from a complete supply chain point of view, we can focus into efficiency in segments, but when we look at the whole thing, we're suboptimal because we've still got those commercial relationships which are normally based on not very much trust at all. And I think that's probably one of the aspects I was trying to touch on, which was if we were able to be a lot more open and visible across our supply chain arrangements, suddenly we get to a much better place. And I fully take on Courtney's point about these, let's say, tactical arrangements within the things that we can control. But actually, our sphere of control or influence, at least, can actually spread much wider if we're integrated and our systems are interoperable.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I wanted to actually real quick, I wanted to answer a question that was in there from Julie on those businesses that are creating unified e-commerce experiences. I think there's some out there that are kind of differentiating the industry and forcing competitors to, think differently as well. I think of like a Chewy, that they've created now this environment where the PetSmarts and the Petcos of the world now have to keep up, create more robust e-commerce platforms. So I wouldn't say anybody's doing it perfectly, but there are those game changers out there that they're so really, really good at e-commerce that they're forcing those brick and mortars to now take that same approach, right? The ship to the store, the create the digital experience inside of the store. They want that e-commerce like approach, but they also want to go in and physically buy their dog food or take their dogs in to do something else. So I think a Chewy is a good example of done really, really well on the e-commerce side for the last 10 years. That's now forced that adoption for good in the other pet, stores of the world. That's just kind of one example of, I thought, that's doing it pretty well.
I mean, look at Target as well.
Yeah,
Target with Starbucks look store within stores. I mean, forget the Stanley Cup buzz that they were able to generate, which is phenomenal. the idea that this kind of BOPUS 2.0, right? The first model of BOPUS was I order online, I come there, I pick it up, I go home. Now I order online, I get there, and it's, hey, do you want a cup of coffee too? That's the urgency and discovery of the store combined with digital convenience and the ability to get some of that shopping done in that and through that kind of channel. And then look at the other side of it. Again, I'll call out, just I was in an Untucket location that had a huge impact on me. There was an entire row in an apparel store of try me on shirts. They are not optimizing to get me to buy as much product as I can within the store. They're optimized to give me the best possible experience so that they get lifetime value from me, whether it's online or offline. That is brilliant. And that's designing physical spaces that understand digital and digital experience that understand physical space opportunities, whether it's the Target or Untucket examples.
But by the way, whenever I'm looking, like ordering a Starbucks on my phone, I never actually see, hey, this isn't a Target. I get there and I'm like, oh, okay, well, maybe I do need this from Target. Genius. Right? We have 3 minutes and I do have to drop, but as we're getting into this, like, where is it all going? We use the buzzwords of AI and machine learning and all that. And phygital, my company has subscribed to that hard of it's all phygital. I agree with that though. It's blurring the lines. How do we create that true marriage of physical and digital where one is not detracting from the other? I really think that's where it's going. Over the last 5 years, we've seen it come into its own. 5 years ago, we were still barely doing chip and pin. We were still doing predominantly brick and mortar. E-commerce was good for ones that were just doing e-commerce, but it really hadn't made its way very well into the traditional retailers. Now, because of that embarrassment of riches, all of the options that are out there are some really great integrations, great things that they can do. We will see this phygital revolution actually happen. The next 5 years is not about new technologies. It's about what was already out there, but how do we actually use it, right? It's all been there. None of these things are new. They're indistinguishable from what was there 5 years ago. It's just now we can actually use it, put it into our environments and operationalize it.
I think that piece is super important. I'd add to it one more in terms of where it's going. It's not going to look dramatically different than it does today. Push back on one element, the revolution concept. This is an evolution that is going to happen slowly, and it's going to, when you see a technology, you're like, this makes sense. Mm-hmm. That's when you know something's being done right. When you try something, you're like, this is cool, but I don't know if I love it. That's when innovation is ahead of solving a consumer problem. So when you're walking through the store and you're saying, what would be great if this could happen? And those are the types of technologies, just like Courtney said, it's stuff that already exists. This isn't earth-shattering new tech. This is stuff that we saw stories about 10 years ago, but now it's finally being utilized properly. And the exciting element is it's about strategy and it's about execution, less about some crazy innovation that we couldn't have expected before.
Couldn't agree more. Gary, it looks like you're agreeing as well.
Yeah, I agree. But I mean, the store of the future was a sort of concept emerging from the end of a great recession. Everyone got excited about it, went to conferences and talked about it. But I think it was sort of some aspects of enabling technologies, and as Ethan said, about it's all now about strategy and execution. Whereas back then it was a flight of fantasy. It was like, let's do this store of future. You go back to the store 2 years later, it actually hadn't changed. Exactly. And I think that what we may see sooner than we might expect is for those retailers who are more organized and are much more, say, remarkable, to coin a phrase of Steve Dennis, we'll see those implementing those in a meaningful way that actually delivers the competitive advantage, the long-term loyalty.
It's about consistency, right? I don't need it to be blow my socks off, just be crazy. I just want it to be consistently good every time. That's what I want. I don't need the game-changing thing is cool. It gets you in the door once, but what keeps you there is doing it consistently. That's what I want to see.
Yeah. I also like Target as the example for the unified commerce best practice in response to Julie's question, because when I go in there, I actually do need to use my app to, scan my red card, to do all the functionalities with payments that make sense. So that is a true unified experience where they've made a case for the necessity of leveraging their app as a consumer. And so few retailers have still made that compelling case to the customer that they need to download the retailer app. So just
Sam's Club as well. I couldn't get by in a Sam's Club, right, or a Costco to check out. I just walk out. I scan the stuff as I'm putting it in the cart and I go. I mean, that just makes my trips there so much easier, especially when you got 2 kids in tow and 3 carts, right? So those types of things is what I'm looking for.
Exactly. Well, great note to end on. Thank you all so much for your time. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in, and talk soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.